Here's the Wall Street Journal NBC poll of March. And this is a question about public attitudes towards economic policy. Do you think that cuts in Social Security are acceptable? 77% of Americans say cuts in Social Security are not acceptable. So take that, Ryan. Take that, Obama. Take that, Rivlin. Medicare, 76%, same thing, say cuts in Medicare are not acceptable. It comes to Medicaid, 67% say that cuts in Medicaid are not acceptable. This is this unawareness that Medicaid is not for poor people exclusively, but also allows the middle class to maintain their assets. 55% say that cuts in unemployment insurance are not acceptable. That's because of the propaganda that the unemployed are lazy, right? That has cut in there to some extent. I guess everybody imagines that they're going to need Social Security, Medicare, but something that they won't need the unemployment insurance. They will. Who is in favor of cuts to Medicare? 18% want cuts to Medicare. 22% want cuts to Social Security. Again, that's the lunatic fringe. The question of the millionaire's surtax, in other words, from the point of view of the average person, you can see that they imagine that this is the most effective thing you can do. The support for a millionaire's surtax in this poll is greater than any other number generated. 81% of Americans want a surtax on millionaires. And again, I would say make that a Wall Street sales tax, and you'll be doing an even better job. 56% say that the main problem is jobs and growth, in spite of the brainwashing. Only 40% said that the deficit is the main problem. 60% are afraid of excessive budget gouging by the Republican Party. 22% are willing to accept cuts in K through 12 education, but the rest are not. So what this essentially means is that the American people repudiate the Washington elites, the Wall Street elites, and the rest of these oligarchs. And that goes for Obama and his philosophy of austerity gouging, and, of course, the reactionary Republicans on the other side. Part of this may have to do with the fact, you got to remember, when you're talking about austerity for the American people, the decline of the standard of living in this country is absolutely guaranteed to be about 2/3 of the living standard available, say, in 1967-68. Say, in the last year of Lyndon B. Johnson, you have lost 2/3 of your standard of living. Take a look at shadow government statistics. They broadly confirm a finding which is mine. It may even be 3/4 of the living standard that has been lost. So anybody who says that Americans consume too much, or that austerity is what they need, or that this is even possible to propose, I think is simply very, very wrong. The things that we need to think about are the Economic Bill of Rights of Franklin D. Roosevelt, January 1944, proposed in the State of the Union. And this simply says you have a right to a job, you have a right to an old age pension, you have a right to an education, you have a right to medical care. If you're a farmer, you have a right to a fair price for your crop. If you're a small businessman, you should be protected from monopoly competition, things like Walmart. It's about 8 points. I think I've done most of them. But that is essentially the direction we need to go in. But this is not where we're going. The other thing, where are we now in Weimar? This is I'm constantly thinking about, you compare the present situation to the Weimar Republic on the eve of Hitler's seizure of power. The moment that we're just going through with Obama losing his majority seems to me to be the fall of the last democratically elected government, which was the Miller government in May, June of 1930, which was then followed by the Brüning government from 1930 to 1932. And by the time Brüning got finished, you were about 6 months away from Hitler. You had a von Papen interlude and a von Schleicher interlude, but you're about 6 months away from Hitler. So we are now at the end of the democratically elected phase, so to speak, in Germany. You can see this, right? That Obama says, we're going to assign the Medicare cuts to this commission, which is outside of the Constitution, and it's sort of I would call it, again, a Bonapartist entity. It's a dictatorial board that overrides the normal legislative process. You have similar things going on in states. With Brüning, you have a form of austerity, which we also have here today. Brüning cut the general budget of Germany by about 20%. And if you look at this deal that we've just had, that cuts the domestic discretionary by something like 15%, if I've been able to figure it correctly. So you're getting into the Brüning area. And the general idea is that when you start with this stuff, in a couple of years, you have destroyed your economy. And maybe not so long after that, you've also destroyed your political system. Now, Brüning was known for deflation, meaning heavy taxation and budget cuts at the same time. And this is the interesting thing. The historical experience from Brüning to Schwarzenegger shows one thing. You cut the budget this year, thinking that you're going to save money and reduce your deficit. You will increase the deficit for the following year. These things do not work, even in their own terms. They don't work. They increase the red ink. They don't decrease it. Because in a depression, the private sector has collapsed, right, because of a panic, that bubble that burst. Therefore, the government economic activity is the main thing. You start cutting that, you turn wage earners into unemployment recipients or homeless. You generate more foreclosures. You play havoc with the entire economy. Your social costs go up. That is then shunted over onto the public budget. The deficit gets bigger. Now, I mentioned before, we have a number of Republicans that are already fulfilling the full Brüning profile. That would be Saxby Chambliss of Georgia, the scoundrel who's always got to be there, Coburn of Oklahoma, and a very important example, Governor Snyder of Michigan. This is one of the most sinister figures in the world, with Walker of Wisconsin and Kasich of Ohio and these other people. Don't forget the governor of Michigan, because what he's got is not the anti-tax pledge at all. He's got savage, brutal budget cuts and savage, brutal, regressive taxation on old people, sick people, children, and others. In other words, he's got a series of regressive taxes that hit precisely the people that you should be protecting. So when you get into this Brüning territory, you have to ask yourself, if unemployment remains at the real level of 22, 23%, how long can democracy last? How long can representative government last? The people in the Weimar Republic who were looking at this said, look, as long as we have deflation, budget cuts, and high unemployment, there are no arguments against Hitler. Hitler will win every argument because people are desperate. When will we reach that point here? How fast could it go downhill to that point? And why don't we really do something to avoid it? The plan that I have at the top of my webpage at tarpley.net, in the headline says the goal of this program is to create 30 million productive jobs at union pay scales. Because that's what you need. The real unemployment, the unemployment, underemployment, discouraged workers, people who have given up in despair, I estimate right now in the United States to be about 30 million people. So you got 30 million people, generally quite well educated, or at least reasonably educated on a world scale, literate, capable of working, wanting to work in most cases. Look at that resource that you're wasting. And that gets us into the real indictment. What a commentary on the ruling class of the United States, that they divide themselves into the Malthusian group, which is the Democratic Party, and the monetarist group. These are two brands of savagery that are competing. This is what we have. The most urgent thing is to somehow dump this ruling class, because they have now struck out so many times that it's clear that they're never going to change. People have got to realize that you cannot relegate the tasks of governing and policy making to this elite, right? What do you got? You've got Soros. Soros is really the center of it, although he has ultra-left overtones. You've got James Baker III, that's sort of center to right. You've got George Shultz and his people, that's sort of right-wing. And then you've got Koch, Mellon Scaife, and these people, extreme right-wing or reactionary or proto-fascist, as you might say. That's the ruling elite. And if you're willing to let them make decisions for you, then you're doomed. You're gone, because they will come up with more and more of these Malthusian or monetarist monstrosities.
Webster Tarpley, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's something happening here. Yeah. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there.
I've been speaking with Webster Tarpley. Today's show has been Austerity Psychosis Grips Washington, D.C. Webster Tarpley is an economic historian, author, and lecturer. He is author of Against Oligarchy, 9/11 Synthetic Terror, Made in the USA, and co-author of George Bush, The Unauthorized Biography. His latest books are Obama, The Postmodern Coup, The Making of a Manchurian Candidate, and Obama, The Unauthorized Biography. His prescient economic work, Surviving the Cataclysm, A Study of the World Financial Crisis, is now out in paperback. Visit his website at www.tarpley.net. That's TARPLEY.net. Email him at tarpley@tarpley.net. Guns and Butter is produced and edited by Bonnie Faulkner and Yarrow Mako. To make comments or order copies of shows, email us at blfaulkner@yahoo.com. That's BLFAULKNER@yahoo.com. Visit our website at www.gunsandbutter.org. That's GUNSANDBUTTER.org.